VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And we thank you for joining us on Crosstalk, coming your way from VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, as we observe what's happening in our nation, we see some states that are just coming apart at the seams as they have capitulated to a societal, an agenda that is contrary to biblical authority and contrary to biblical morality. States are literally running amok. I mean, look what's happening in states like California, New York, and Illinois, and Colorado that become havens for the barbaric acts of killing babies in the womb. Some have become sanctuaries for body-mutilating procedures on minors. Other states have declared a war on girls and women's sports, allowing biological males to take away their awards, their records, their scholarship opportunities. We observe parental rights under attack as states have usurped the rights of parents. I praise the Lord for organizations that have risen up and advanced family values that stem from biblical authority. Such is the case today with a group that is making a difference in the state of Texas. Joining us today, we welcome Jonathan Saenz, president and attorney for Texas Values. They're a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. Prior to leading Texas Values, Jonathan headed the First Liberty Institute offices in Austin, where he served as Director of Legislative Affairs, as well as attorney for First Liberty Institute. He's been involved in numerous court cases, including those before the Texas Supreme Court, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court. And Jonathan, thank you for joining us today here on Crosstalk.
Well, it's great to be with you, Jim.
So I'd like to ask, first of all, how did our country ever get to this point? I mean, we haven't always been this way, have we?
You know, it's a great question. I think about some of the work I was studying when I was in law school a little over 20 years ago, and even leading up to that point, I used to listen to Jay Sekulow on the radio, Christian lawyer, and, there were conflicts 20, 30 years ago, but a lot of it centered around the freedom to pray and things in public schools and things of that nature. And we still see those concerns from time to time, but, things have been flipped on their head. I mean, they've turned upside down in many ways. I would have never guessed that I needed to be prepared at some point to defend the differences between male and female and how important that would be in a lot of ways in our society. But that's where we are. And you total up the number of how many babies have died from abortion, and, we're making a difference against that number now with Roe versus Wade being overturned in states like Texas that are protecting babies from the beginning. And so there's some things to be encouraged by, but, there are times where you feel like, the problems, the conflicts continue to add up, and, it's not always clear where they're coming from. But, I grew up in a time where Ronald Reagan was the president. I don't even remember if my parents considered themselves Republican or Democrat. I just know, he was one of the most popular presidents at the time. And I'll never forget when the Challenger shuttle exploded, Johnson Space Center, the NASA Control Center, and so on, very close to the part of Houston where I grew up. And so that touched us, as you might imagine. I was in middle school, but the country came together, right? And President Reagan called out to God, almost for comfort, but also for guidance. And I felt like, even though it was tragic, there was a lot of unity around the country that we were all on the same team.
Yeah, and right now we've seen division like never before. I mean, it doesn't matter what the issue is. Congress is going to be, or even state legislatures. I mean, the division is so intense that it doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. If somebody in the opposing party proposes it, we have to be against it.
Yeah, and look, some of this is by design. I mean, there are some people out there, some entities out there that are very focused on creating division where, common sense tells us there's nothing to be arguing about, right? I mean, you think about the amount of effort it takes to convince people that it's okay for men to compete in women's sports and that a 12-year-old girl or 13-year-old girl like Chloe Cole, that you should fill her body with puberty blockers, right? I mean, just saying that word, puberty blockers, right? You're stopping what's naturally happening in order to what? To fulfill some thought or feeling that a child had in a moment, or some ideology that people are trying to push on these kids. But that's what's happening. A lot of people, they thrive in chaos, or they love it when there's, they're calling things out and challenging them and questioning them. But a lot of times it creates a lot of harm, and, there are victims all around us. And every now and then you'll see Democrats and Republicans come together. We see that on some of our legislation in Texas. But a lot of that is, I can be honest with you, the results of some elections recently where, the Democratic Party has gone so to the left or the extremes that, voters are saying, I didn't vote for Republicans or no one in our family or in our generations, but, they're just voting their values.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan Saenz, our guest here today, president and attorney for Texas Values. Jonathan, I've heard increasingly from just a number of people who have said, our church won't even say or preach against abortion because they believe it's a political issue, and our pastor, our church, just doesn't get engaged with politics. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, this is a matter of life and death. Now, some people have tried to make these issues political, or they try to tie it to that in a way to make people uncomfortable and be nervous about talking about it. But there's no reason to. These are important conversations, and the issue of abortion is a life and death issue. It's an issue of morality, and so it's the exact type of issue that churches and pastors and church leaders should be talking about. And I can guarantee you, somebody's probably talking to your kid about it if you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's talking to those people in the congregation about it. If you're not, they're bombarded on social media or wherever with all these, dishonest ideas. And so I do think that, the opportunity, if not the responsibility for the churches to talk particularly to the people that go to their church, their congregation, has never been higher.
Do you believe our country is waking up? I mean, we have what seems to be a growing movement of corporations that are backing away from the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those who are distancing themselves from the human rights campaign and pride parades and so forth. Are we waking up, or is this just maybe a stalling time until the Trump administration is over and done with?
Well, look, elections do have consequences. So I do think a lot of this is a reflection of people feeling like the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction, but also a reflection of who's in elective office. And not that the government is about, solves everything, but the law is a teacher. Government belongs to those who show up. I mean, these are some phrases that I mention a lot, but have a lot of truth to them, right? And so, when you have a White House that's come in and said, we're going to get back to common sense, right? We're not going to have somebody in a high-ranking position in the military that is male but dresses up, as a woman and wears a dress every day with lipstick. I mean, and in a lot of ways, those are things that people sort of looked away from, or the Democrats tried to encourage, right? Gave those people those positions when they may not have earned them, and they certainly added a lot of confusion and get a lot of question in people's minds of whether or not the focus was on leading, and particularly when it comes to national security issues, those important things should have been first and foremost, and instead, a lot of those times those picks looked like it was to promote a specific political ideology, right? And so you see the Trump administration just making common sense decisions, but also making it clear that if people don't get with the program, that there's some enforcement that comes behind it, whether it's the Department of Justice and so on. You see the border security issues. People have stopped for so long. Oh, you can't solve the border security issues. It's just throw up your hands, build all the walls you want. And now we see the numbers gone down drastically of border crossings, even in states where I live, like Texas, where it's been one of the biggest problems. They said it couldn't happen. They said it couldn't be done, but obviously someone showed up and did get it done. And so that's important when you think about the next election cycle that's coming up pretty soon.
Yes, and as we think about the election cycle, and not only here for 2026, but we look ahead to 2028 as well, so many of the things that are happening, the change that we've seen across the nation is being done by executive order. But all it takes is one change in executive, and those orders are going to change as well.
Yeah, look, that risk is there. I mean, and even if it's your guy or you're a Trump fan and you like the executive orders, you also have to be aware that, to your point, they could elect, somebody else could be elected and those are gone. And so the opportunities that exist to have to have laws passed at the congressional level
Mm-hmm.
and also at the state level, so they last beyond any particular election or administration. And hopefully we'll have someone in office that continues those policies and executive orders that President Trump is putting together. But you don't know. I mean, so I think you can't take this time for granted and think, we're back to the golden age and everything's good. And I don't like to be too negative, to be honest. I don't think there's anything wrong when there are some things going well to celebrate, to be encouraged by, to build some optimism, right? That's what Ronald Reagan was so great at, right? When he talked about, that shining city on a hill. That's what a lot of times as Americans we want to be in touch with, right? Something that gives us hope for the next day. And so I think it's good to have a healthy balance, but I also think you can't sugarcoat it to think that, everything's going to be okay. And that's just the reality of our political cycle every 2 years, the presidential every 4 years. That tug of war is going to continue to be there, right? And so you have to be prepared and really just embrace that type of struggle is always going to be there, but it's important to be involved in it.
Indeed, it is. And there is the danger of apathy at this time where many people sit back and say, well, President Trump's in office and he's fighting against DEI and standing up, for girls' private spaces and sports and everything else. And Governor Abbott, well, he's been taking a stand. Therefore, my job is done. I mean, there's danger in that kind of mindset.
Yeah, well, we got to continue to look at having the right leaders in positions, training up the next set of leaders. One of the reasons I'm excited about our annual event, the Texas Faith Fest, which is coming up on September 26th and 27th, the end of this month, is we're going to have some amazing speakers that are going to talk about these issues. But the event is not just about listening to a speaker like the governor. Governor Greg Abbott's going to be at the event, David Barton, and some really notable people. But it's also taking that information forward after the event. Our tagline is educate, motivate, and activate. So then it gives you something to do afterwards so you know what your role is. A lot of times people are like, oh, okay, I should run for office. Well, maybe not. Where do you have the most influence? What's going on in your own community? Where are those responsibilities? I tell people a lot of times, the seat at the table that's probably the most important for you to be at is the dinner table every night or as often as you can. But certainly there's places beyond that where we need to have the right leaders in the right positions. A lot of times those are in elections. And so at our event, we're going to teach people about all these different processes and concepts and what the issues are that we need to look for when we're deciding on who to vote for.
Indeed. And friends, in our next segment, we're going to get further into this Texas Faith Fest coming up September 26th and 27th in Austin, and there's a number of speakers. We'll be talking about them and some of the topics that will be coming up and how you can get engaged with this. I know that this stems from your organization, Jonathan, the Texas Values, and I'm going to have you give us a word about Texas Values because you were born out of the First Liberty Institute some years back. Just give us a word about the organization.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Texas Values is a statewide nonprofit Christian law and policy organization. We are the official Family Policy Council for the state of Texas in association with Family Policy Alliance, and historically with focus on the family. And we focus on the issues of faith, family, and freedom, and we advocate for those values in the arenas of the courts, the legislature, and the media. So wherever it is that we need to show up when biblical values, common sense values are being challenged, we pull whatever toolbox we need, tool out of the toolbox to make sure those values are protected.
And we'll talk about some of those values right after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, standing up for Texas values. Back in a minute.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how fast does Niagara Falls erode?
Chris, based on historical measurements, the falls has eroded upriver approximately 5 feet per year. In the early 1800s, when Sir Charles Lyell was promoting his millions of years concept, he used Niagara Falls to support his theory. Lyell claimed it was eroding at less than 1 foot per year, thus was tens of thousands of years old. This, he claimed, disproved the Bible. But in reality, Lyell ignored the evidence of rapid erosion. In fact, the erosion rate and the distance of erosion almost exactly points to the Great Flood of Noah's day as the start of erosion of the river's valley. The fact is, Charles Lyell was wrong, and the Bible's still right. It all started back in Genesis.
Thanks, Dr. John. For more information, visit us on the web at icr.org. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Jonathan Saenz, our guest today, president and attorney for Texas Values. And we're talking certainly about standing up for Texas values and upcoming conference that they have September 26th and 27th, Texas Faith Fest. We'll talk about some of the, you've been having a number of battles in Texas. I mean, are all your legislators back home again?
Well, as a matter of fact, we actually are in a special session. The governor decided there were some very important matters that did not get taken care of during our regular session, even though there were a lot of things that were done and very successfully. So we're about to wrap up the second special session by the end of the day tonight, but that's important because there's one last vote that the Senate is going to take on a pro-life bill and also a bill to protect women and girls in private spaces like showers, bathrooms, and locker rooms.
Yeah. So important time and critically important, Texans, for you to be involved with your legislators at this time. I understand your organization, Texas Values, that you were involved with the Texas Heartbeat Law. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. We led the strategic effort to get the Texas Heartbeat Law passed. You know, I was pro-life even before I started doing this work, before I went to law school, before I went to undergrad, and it's something that's always been important to me. And so to be a part, to lead the effort, to have the Texas Heartbeat Law passed was probably one of the just achievements of mine that I'm most proud of. Obviously, I didn't do it by myself. A lot of great organizations and other leaders that were a part of this effort and this victory. But, you know, it was right before Roe versus Wade was overturned. We were right at the forefront of one of the most important time periods for the pro-life issue and pushing back against abortion. But it had been building for a while. And look, you got to have a professional approach to advocacy in Texas. We're talking about the 8th largest economy in the world. We got a big state. There are a lot of other big players that hate the work that we do, that spend millions of dollars to try to defeat it. And sometimes you've got Republicans that are not really with you, even though you think that they are. So they say it all the time in, you know, the Capitol. It's easier to kill a bill than it is to pass a bill. There's a lot of things that can go wrong.
Right.
But everything came together in 2021 when we got the Texas Heartbeat Law passed.
You are also engaged in the Save Women's Sports Act to ensure fairness in women's sports. And this is such a huge issue all over the country. And I think, how can anyone think it's fair for biological males to take away the records, the medals, the trophies, the placements, even scholarships from biological girls in girls' sports?
Yeah, no, it's hard to believe that these are the issues we're facing now, but thank goodness that so many young ladies have decided they've had enough and they're pushing back. Their families are standing with them. It's such a courageous position to be in. And for years, as a lawyer myself, as a nonprofit organization, we get phone calls and emails from people and parents and families saying, hey, I need your help on this. They don't know who to turn to.
Yeah.
They're not sure how to handle all these issues. And so when you have young ladies like Riley Gaines, and there's an athlete in Texas, Brooke Slusser, who's suing the NCAA because of circumstances where they were forced to share a locker room, a bathroom, a dorm room, and all those things in Brooke's case for 2 years. Brooke Slusser is going to speak at our event. She's a volleyball player from North Texas, where she went out west to California, and for over a year she was being forced to have a male teammate and also share a living quarter with this guy, and they were sharing a hotel room and bathroom on away trips. She had no idea, but when she tells the story of how she found out about this and how it became more obvious, wow, it's powerful. But these ladies stepping forward and saying that, you know, they're not going to just be run over and they're not going to let men take over women's sports has really been one of the most important battles that's been playing out. And that's why it's important, you know, for it to pass a law, because you might get one victory for one person, and that's great. But if you got to go back to court every single time,
right,
the other side's going to win at some point, and people are just going to get exhausted. So having that statewide law, or even a law at the national level that Trump has done with executive orders, goes really far.
So the Save Women's Sports Act, again, ensuring fairness in women's sports has gone through in Texas. And you mentioned the Texas Women's Privacy Act, and again, giving protection to women in what should be sex-segregated spaces like showers and locker rooms, domestic violence shelters, even prisons. I mean, it really, Jonathan, shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that it's bad to allow men into these sex-segregated spaces.
Well, for years, young women and ladies have been complaining. They've been expressing concerns, oftentimes under fear of punishment, because they didn't know who they could trust, and they're afraid that they were going to be attacked. I mean, imagine that you have a 14-year-old daughter, and she's in the middle of this conflict, and the school is not telling you that there's now a male student undressing in your daughter's locker room. And if she reports it, which, if they call our office, we can help. You know how it goes, right? People start talking about it, the rumors, and all of a sudden the attacks come on the young lady, the girl who said, I shouldn't have to have this male student undress next to me. They got to walk down the hall every day, right? We've walked with parents through these circumstances. It can be very difficult for them to do something because they're so concerned about the backlash, and they're afraid the school district's not going to look out for them and back them up. And their reasons are valid, because that's what's happened in a lot of situations in Dripping Springs ISD here in Texas and Round Rock ISD. The school districts do not protect the parents or the kids that come forward and express their concerns. They're sort of hung out to dry, sadly, and forced to undress in closets. Or, in Round Rock ISD, they said the girl could use a pop-up tent inside the locker room. I don't even know what that is, right? Yeah, right. But the focus is on, we don't care about what the girls' concerns are. We're catering to this one male student who shouldn't be in there to begin with. And so Riley Gaines told us, after we were working for her many years, she said, listen, the Save Women's Sports issue, so important, but it could be even more important to make sure we have these privacy protections in the showers, locker rooms, and bathrooms. And you might be like, oh, my city or my school district has that resolved. I'm not worried about that happening in my area. Really? Well, what about when a team from another city travels to play against your kids or another university, and these issues sneak up on you? So that's why it's important for have those protections in place. So the Senate is taking a vote in Texas later today, right after 6 o'clock. That should be the final vote on the Texas Women's Privacy Act. And, Jim, this is going on. We've been working on this issue for over 10 years. You probably remember the bathroom ordinance in Houston where the sermons got subpoenaed by pastors. Yes. That's where a lot of this started, and we said then in 2015 we need a statewide law. But so be it. We're 10 years later, and we're glad that it looks like it's all going to get done.
Friends, again, understand what Jonathan just said. They were actually mandating pastors, you need to submit your sermons to us in advance for approval. Folks, it's outlandish what is taking place. And consider what just happened in Virginia, where you have two male students who are complaining about a female identifying as a male coming into their private spaces. They complained, and it's the boys that got suspended as a result of complaining. And friends, this is taking place. But again, you're standing up for this in the state of Texas. And later this month, you have Texas Faith Fest, September 26th and 27th. So give us a word about this event.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. This is the 8th year that we've had this event. We get together for 2 days. It's a Friday and Saturday. We feed you Chick-fil-A on Friday. There's a Rudy's Barbecue lunch on Saturday. But you're going to hear from some of the most incredible speakers, like Brooke Slusser, this female athlete that had to go through all of these privacy violations and the unfairness in sports. You're not only going to hear from her, you're going to hear from her mother. When you hear a parent talk about these issues, it is striking, right? And I want people to be in the room, right? There will be a live stream that we offer, but there's something special about being in that room and seeing and feeling that emotion, that real sense of what it's like to go through these things and not know how it's going to turn out. And so Governor Greg Abbott, his role as our governor, I mean, he said it is a priority. It is a priority item, special session that we're going to pass the Texas Women's Privacy Act. We're going to have updated laws to have stronger enforcement on our pro-life laws. So he's going to speak at our event. I get to do a Q&A. I get to ask him some questions. It's going to be exciting. David Barton is going to come talk about our Texas Ten Commandments law. That law, I did a speech in front of some religious leaders from Europe and Asia 2 weeks ago as a part of the United States Department of State event. They had heard about the Texas Ten Commandments law over in, all the way on the other side of the world in all these different countries that I can't even spell. So we're going to talk about that new law, though, with David Barton, who's a wonderful historian with Wall Builders, Chloe Cole, who's a detransitioner, Abby Johnson, one of the most important voices and advocates on the pro-life issue, as well as a number of Texas House and Senate members. And we're going to spend time training people how they can use this information after the event and move forward to stand up for faith, family, and freedom. But the event is September 26th and 27th. Go to our website, txvalues.org. Love to have everybody there.
Again, that's txvalues.org, txvalues.org, and you can get more information on registering for the event. taking place on the 26th and 27th of September, just a few weeks away. And you'll see all the information there, list of speakers. And you did say Governor Abbott, he is your keynote, correct?
Yeah, no, he's going to speak. And the last time he spoke was 4 years ago. You know, we've been doing this event for 8 years. A couple years ago, Ted Cruz was there. We had Mike Huckabee spoke at this event last year. Okay, now he's the ambassador, the UN ambassador to Israel. So we've had some incredible people that have spoken at this event. But 4 years ago, when Governor Abbott spoke the last time, he did a bill signing at our event. So I'm not promising he's going to do that again. But, you know, it happened before. It could happen again.
Right.
We'll see.
Now, you said a name very quickly, Chloe Cole, detransitioner, and she really has a story to tell that many in the legacy media censor out. They don't want to hear her story, but she's got an important story to be told.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, you know, you have a 13-year-old child, and they come to you, you know, in Chloe's case, a young girl, and, you know, they say they feel like a boy or they want to change their body. And all of a sudden, you know, the medical community pumps your daughter full of puberty blockers, right? We were talking about this earlier. It blocks naturally what's supposed to happen. And then at 14 or 15 years old, maybe I think it was 16 or 17, that child decides, I don't want to do this. Think about the courage it takes to go against, you know, this industry that's been created now, you know, trying to convince kids and parents that they can change, you know, their sex. And standing up against that, they, you know, the other side, the transgender side, many of those advocates were tearing her apart on social media, right? You can't even get insurance coverages in some part of the country to transition back, so to speak, when you decide and realize that this is not healthy and it's not a good idea for your body. As a matter of fact, the suicide rate is so much higher for kids and adults that go through this process, even though the other side tries to convince you that's not the case. So not only did Chloe Cole say, I'm not going through with this, I want to go back to how I was naturally made, she now goes and talks about it. She helps states pass laws like this. She talks about how she was misled on a lot of these things by people in the medical community and the psychological community. And she's 21 years old. I mean, an amazing leader, but hearing the words from her mouth from the journey that she went through, boy, it's something special. So we're excited to have her at our Texas Faith Fest event coming up at the end of this month.
So many young people have been convinced by school authorities and some in the healthcare industry that this is what you need to do to be affirming of yourself. Well, Chloe followed through on that, and her eyes were opened, and how she has regretted that. Look at the regret that we're having, even from the recent shooter in Minneapolis, on identifying as transgender, and it's been horrible to see this, Jonathan.
No, it's really tragic, because I think what happens is, you know, people look at this from a political perspective and the truth gets covered up, right? They don't talk about some of these things, you know, and I don't know what happened with this shooter and all about his background and details. I just know that, you know, people are referring to him as a male and people are criticizing that, right? They're still making the same mistake, intentionally or not, that I think, gets rolled into all these issues and can lead to some serious mental health concerns. And cries for help are there. They might have been there with this shooter, and for political reasons, sadly, people are looking the other way.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Jonathan Saenz, our guest, president and attorney for Texas Values. We'll be talking more after the break. Stay with us.
Relationships have been shattered due to a lack of forgiveness. It's impacted marriages, parents and children, siblings, and even church families as a whole. Some have said that forgiveness is the most difficult commandment that we are given as Christians. Why is that? Perhaps it is because it strikes at the core of our pride that says we deserve better than we are getting. Perhaps it seems if we do forgive, we are letting that person win in a situation that hurt us in some way. In the book, Forgiven People Forgive, Pastor Jeff Miller shows us where the rubber meets the road. At the heart of why we should forgive is the fact that God has forgiven us, thus we are commanded to forgive. It's so easy for bitterness to take root in a heart that is unforgiving. Forgiven People Forgive is available for a donation of $9 or more to VCY America. Call 1-800-729-9829.
Friends, the website is TX Values, standing for Texas, txvalues.org. And right at the top of the page, you're going to see information there for Texas Faith Fest. You click on that, and they can register right through the website. Is that correct, Jonathan?
That's absolutely right. And there is a standalone website, texasfaithfest.com. We've had a little bit of trouble here and there, but if you go to our main site, txvalues.org, it should be fine. And look, there are different types of tickets people can get, right? If you want more of a VIP experience, you want to go to be a part of our private dinner on Friday night at the Steiner Ranch Steakhouse overlooking Lake Travis. There's an option to do that. If you want to meet some of the speakers, we're going to have a reception where people can meet some of the speakers. That's a little added bonus there if you want to do that. But for general admission price, you get fed on 2 days and get some of the most important information that you can have on the values issues. We think it's a pretty good deal.
txvalues.org is the website. And I understand that you're using the facilities at Great Hills Baptist Church. Is that correct?
That's right. Pastor Danny Forshee, who is the pastor of Great Hills Baptist Church, talk about a leader himself. You know, for many years, he's one of those pastors that comes up to the Capitol, testifies, will stand with you in press conferences. So he leads from the front, and so this is a wonderful facility. And, you know, over the years, we've had people like Danny Goki that performed at our event, Christian singers like Matthew West and others. So fantastic facility, and we're honored to partner with them on this event.
Okay, and again, that's being held in Austin, but all the details at txvalues.org. Our phone number to Crosstalk today, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. We see just a number of areas that they have engaged in, really fighting for these aspects of morality and decency and standing up for life, whether it be through preserving life and that of abortion, and certainly the other end of life as well, from conception to natural death. And then we think of the attack that's happened on women and girls' sports. We see what's happening in areas that should be private, sex segregated spaces, and they're fighting on your behalf. They're having a conference coming up, and leaders that will be coming together discussing life and marriage and religious freedom and human sexuality. And you find the info at txvalues.org. Our number to speak with our guest today, 800-733-9829. Jonathan, what will be the fate if we remain silent?
Well, look, so often that is how, evil prevails, right? And you can understand why, right? And particularly sometimes as Christians. I mean, we try to think about how we can treat people well and treat people with care and, live like Jesus and all these different things that are important and have value, but sometimes it can lead people to think, okay, I should just not say anything, but other people will take advantage of that oftentimes, sadly, right? There's a proverb in Book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 17 says, he who presents his case first seems right until someone steps forth to challenge him. Now, look, I know a lot of people are not made like me. I'm not saying that I'm something special. God gives us different gifts. And so I know that a lot of times our organization's in the position to be a voice for people. And you've got a lot of stations on this broadcast. They're in 40 states. There's an organization like Texas and they're part of the Family Policy Council Network. So I encourage people to connect with their local state group as well. But that's what we do. A lot of times people don't have the courage to be at a press conference, to file a lawsuit. It's just not what they do. Their skill set is something else, or their advocacy or their voice is just not as developed. That's where we stand in the gap. That's what we do. We lead from the front as well. And, a lot of times these issues have to be resolved. We have to stand up. We've got to we got to let truth prevail. But I also think we have to be reminded as Christians the strength that comes with, not just defending our faith, but living it out and trusting it, right? To tell the truth, on these issues, to stand for truth, and not to be overly concerned with some of the results or outcome, and know that sometimes you got to go into the courts, you got to go into the legislature to make sure that our values don't get run over.
Yeah, and friends, you don't have to be from Texas to speak out today on these issues. Our phone number is open, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Jonathan, there's another area that you're addressing right now as well in your legislature, and this is a ban on chemical abortion. We see states that have said no abortion to take place in our state, and yet we have people that are easily obtaining prescription drugs to take the life of the unborn child and coming across state lines and doing just that. Yeah, tell us what's percolating in Texas at this point.
Yeah, it's been a real concern. We passed a law 4 years ago that should have helped in a lot of ways, but the other side always seems to find, what they think is a loophole or another way to get around these things. And, a lot of times these abortion pills are coming from out of the country. You may not even be able to find out exactly, who owns the company or who's going to be accountable. And the other part of that, it takes the doctor out of the equation. So if there are complications or something that goes wrong, and let me be clear, it's a set of 2 pills when they send these through the mail that are designed to kill the baby, and for the woman to deliver the baby, who knows how, right? I mean, could be at a very advanced stage, and we've heard some horror stories, girls in their dorm rooms bleeding all over the place, in the bathroom by themselves, not sure who to go to. In some circumstances, there have been deaths that women have suffered from these type of pills. And so, and so you sometimes learn after a law goes into effect, maybe there's a different way, a stronger way to have enforcement. That's what we're trying to do with House Bill 7. That's the bill that's supposed to get final approval later today on the Texas Senate. It's already passed the Texas House. Some people think it's going to be one of the strongest piece of legislation. So anybody in the state of Texas could go into court or be in touch with our Attorney General's office to file a complaint on these issues when they hear about it. Even though, there's a big Planned Parenthood clinic in the Houston area that's closing down, these pills are still coming into our state and abortions are taking place. So we've got to shine a light on that. And one way is to make these distributors and people sending it, people that are involved in this process, held accountable by the law.
There was an article that just came out today from Newsmax about a state law that was passed in Texas earlier this year enabling public schools to offer voluntary daily periods for prayer or for reading religious texts. And I see that the Attorney General of Texas now, Ken Paxton, is encouraging public school students to say the Lord's Prayer or set aside time in the school for that purpose as well.
Well, look, think about all the things that kids have to deal with. You think about what happened last week. I feel like not only was that a school shooting, it was a church shooting. It really felt like the shooting in Minnesota had a lot to do with what the kids were doing and adults were. They were in the middle of a Catholic Mass, a religious service. They were in the middle of prayer. And so you think about all the things that are going on in not only the kids, but that parents face. And so having some time, some moments to be reflective, to be in prayer, maybe give the kids some comfort and calm could go a long way. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said as long as these things are voluntary, that it's permissible and constitutional. There was a case at the U.S. Supreme Court 3 years ago, Coach Joe Kennedy, who won his case to allow for voluntary prayer, even by an employee. At the U.S. Supreme Court, he was fired as a football coach for praying on his own on the 50-yard line after a football game. The court said, no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. The schools can't restrict that. They can't punish people. And so that's made it very clear that, this time for voluntary prayer, you're standing on very strong constitutional ground.
I find it interesting, Paxton's quote. He said this: in Texas classrooms, we want the Word of God opened, the Ten Commandments displayed, and prayers lifted up. Twisted radical liberals want to erase truth, dismantle the solid foundation that America's success and strength were built upon, and erode the moral fabric of our society.
Well, and look what's been happening in public school classrooms. There's been a religion that's being taught to a lot of kids, even in Texas schools, particularly in our capital city in Austin, and it's been the transgender ideology. It's been the Pride Month. It's been the drag queens that they've been allowing to read to your kids in a public school library or classroom. It's gone, and to many it's sort of taken on a religious nature, the way that they're that they hold so strong to pushing these different ideologies in the schools. And so the kids have been bombarded by all these things that do not have foundation, do not have some type of established truth, and a lot of times really are about politics and could be leading the kids into dangerous situations and could and possibly be grooming them for sexual behavior and becoming victims at a very young age. And so I think it's time to get back and to restore those values that were there before and restore those freedoms. And, having encouragement to take time in prayer, I think, can go a long way.
Our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. I see you're also having, you mentioned Abby Johnson. Now, she aborted 2 of her own children, and she ran a Planned Parenthood, did she not?
Yeah, she actually did. Abby Johnson's story and transformation, I mean, if you would have told people about it, and had not met her or knew anything about it, and you would have sort of had to, create some kind of person and circumstance, people would have said, there's no way. I mean, this has got to be fiction. And so, the truth can a lot of times be more powerful than fiction, thankfully. And Abby Johnson was one of the most successful Planned Parenthood directors that they ever had, right? They kept promoting her. She was in College Station right there near Texas A&M University. And, yeah, I mean, to your point, these were things that she went through herself personally, and, who knows how many hundreds of thousands of abortions took place at that clinic under her management. And then for her to have, and it wasn't just one moment, it sort of happened over a series of time, but there was one striking moment when she was in one of the clinic rooms, the operating rooms, and they were asking her to assist in some way in an abortion, and she saw the baby moving away to try to avoid the instruments, if you will, that the so-called doctor or person was using to perform the abortion. The baby's trying to get away, right? The baby could sense the danger, and it was just too much for her, right? And so, but not just that. She's moved forward to be one of the strongest pro-life advocates, help leading people out of the abortion industry, being a safe place, if you will, for them to get on the ground afterwards, and just being a source of encouragement, and also putting her voice out there politically. When Trump ran for re-election, she was one of the people that spoke at the convention and talked about the pro-life issue. What she has done to raise the visibility of the pro-life and abortion issue and made it clear that this is something that all voters should be thinking about is, the credit that goes to her is probably, certainly true and at, one of the highest levels of anyone that's ever been involved in the pro-life movement.
We see some states like Texas that have made huge moves to protect life in the womb, and then you've got others, such as California and Illinois and Colorado and New York that are just digging in their heels, doing everything possible to take the life of that innocent child.
Yeah, look, and we feel that assault here in Texas from other states. I'm not making this up. For months, I don't know, maybe it was over a year, there was this huge billboard just down the street from our state capitol on South Congress. This is the road that runs right up to our state capitol in Austin. This huge billboard of Gavin Newsom's face and forehead and his headshot, okay? I'm not trying to make fun of him. I'm just saying that's what the billboard was. It was kind of hard to miss. And he's there on the billboard encouraging women to come to California to have abortion, basically saying he'll pay for you to fly over there to kill your baby. I mean, and I really feel like that's preying on women that can be vulnerable. We passed a state law, though, this legislative session that made it clear if local tax dollars are being used, like they were trying to do in Austin and San Antonio, for women to fly to another states to get an abortion, that's illegal, and there are going to be consequences, and we're cracking down on it.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break. Our number 800-733-9829. Jonathan Saenz with us, president and attorney for Texas Values. Her website, txvalues.org. Back in a minute.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Over the Labor Day weekend, President Trump stunned a lot of people with a post on Truth Social. He is saying that he wants to get to the bottom of the COVID shot. He has bragged for years about warp speed and what a great success it has been. And he's even been booed at his own rallies by his own supporters when bringing up the success of warp speed, the military that was behind the distribution of COVID-19 bioweapon shots, as many believe. Well, now he has apparently heard the truth. Someone has gotten through the veil, and he is not a happy camper. He says he wants the answers now. He wants to know, was warp speed a big success or not? This is great news, folks. Pray for President Trump to get the right information to protect us, the American people, from the pharmaceutical industrial complex. I'm Brandon House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Jonathan Saenz with us today, president and attorney for Texas Values. A special event coming up, Texas Faith Fest, September 26th and 27th, taking place in Austin and utilizing the facilities of Great Hills Baptist Church there for their event. All the registration information available on their website, txvalues.org, txvalues.org. Our number, 800-733-9829. We have William calling from Florence, Kentucky. William, you're on the air.
Hello, Jim. This is William. I appreciate your guest, and I really enjoy your program. I just think the liberals are trying to take down the world, with this New World Order and everything like that. And I thank God for Trump and everything. And Jim, I thank you for all your programs and everything to keep us knowledge of what's going on. And I'm just thinking it's the liberals. What do you think, brother?
What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, listen, I think there are a lot of things that are coming at us these days, and we have to not forget the spiritual warfare that could be taking place, right? The thoughts and ideas that get planted into people's minds and sometimes lead them in the wrong direction. And there's some people that it's for political gain or it's for financial gain. They're getting rich off of, these campaigns or these, political efforts and so on, or somehow it, relates to their business. I mean, abortion is big business in the United States, sadly, right? I mean, Planned Parenthood, millions of dollars that they've gotten from the government. Now, Trump has cut that off for a year. We need to extend it further than that, but that's what's happening. It's, the almighty dollar sometimes is ruling the day, and we know how that can move people in the wrong direction sometimes. And so, but we got to, be able to call these things out when necessary, but we also have to back it up with some good, strong facts, some good stories about why these things are important. And I'm excited. That's what we're going to be doing at our Texas Faith Fest event at the end of this month. But, it's also great. Your local groups, wherever you are, connect with them and get involved and, encourage people to talk about these issues. They don't have to be confrontational or, some issue that turns into a big argument. These are important conversations to have, and I think we should do more of that.
Thank you, William.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Bye-bye now. We, no doubt, have many people listening right now who said, oh, my, if only we could have legislation like this passed in our state. There are those listening right now in places like Delaware and New York and Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, and just said, we live in a state of oppression. How can we get from this point to where Texas is?
Well, first of all, you got to make a decision that you're all in and that you're going to do something about it. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen in a year. It may take a little bit longer than you want, but you got to make a decision that it's the right thing to do, and you got to get started now. And I'm glad that, Kentucky has a group like ours. Family Foundation of Kentucky is actually led by David Walls, who used to be our vice president. He got a great opportunity out there in Kentucky. He's doing great work. You mentioned Delaware. Nicole Tice leads the Family Policy Council in the state of Delaware. And so I encourage listeners, whatever state they're in, find out who their Family Policy Council group is and connect with them. But, you look at the issues. We're talking about the Texas heartbeat law, right? Number of years that we built up to that point. Would have loved to have seen that passed 20 years ago. Just didn't happen, right? And we talk about that as an organization. That's why we have a comprehensive approach to advocacy. And we're going to teach people at Texas Faith Fest why that's so important and why you've got to look at all these different fronts. Whatever tool you need to bring out of the toolbox, right? Does that mean get engaged in a local election? Certainly could be. Does that mean going into the courts, right? So we're in like a 2-year cycle. We work on passing a law, and then we work on educating people, like what we're doing now. We've got a website for the Ten Commandments law in Texas. It's tencommandmentstexas.com. We want people to know how to follow it, to know what it stands for, why we need to get those posters up. But then somebody challenges it, right? New York lawyers from the ACLU have sued to take that law down, so we're there protecting it in court. Then the next election cycle comes up. Somebody tries to run someone against the person who passed the Ten Commandments law because they don't like them, and then we're there to support that candidate and make sure they're reelected, and the process starts all over again. But that's a big part of it, is realizing, whether it's today, tomorrow, or in a couple of years, I'm pro-life, and I'm going to work on my state, my community being more pro-life. It may be one baby you save, right? But think about that. Think about if you could know for a certainty that because of your work on the life issue that you saved the life of a child. I mean, that's, I don't know how it gets better than that, and we can't take that for granted.
We can't take it for granted. And friends, it begins, just like the prophet Hosea said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And again, I'm going to go back to that little mantra that you've got for this upcoming seminar session, educate, motivate, activate. It begins with education and knowing the facts, knowing what's going on so that you can be motivated to actually, take necessary action.
That's right. Well, look, Texas, big state, lot of states, big population, a lot of geography. There are 254 counties in Texas. There are 1,200 school districts. Our population's close to 30 million. So we can't do this work on our own. So we have these events so we can help people learn how to do some of these things themselves. We've got a great online educational program called Texas Values University, where you learn from Riley Gaines about Save Women's Sports. You learn about the pro-life issue from Abby Johnson. You learn about religious liberty from Kelly Shackelford at First Liberty Institute. Rick Green talks about a biblical citizenship and worldview. And so, we realize that a big part of our work has to be focused on making sure more people in our sphere of influence understand the issues. They're confident about talking about them, and then they're going to go out there and do something at a school board meeting, at a city council meeting, at their dinner table, making sure their kids understand these issues. But we back it up with solid information. We know the law. We know the facts on these issues. We know a lot of the statistics. We've worked with a lot of people that have dealt with it personally. All that's going to be on display at our Texas Faith Fest event. But that's what it takes these days, to get things done. But everyone has a place where they fit in to the equation. And I'm going to tell one quick story. Early, before I was a lawyer, before I had any political influence, I wasn't on radio shows. I was a law student at the University of Houston. And the university picked a fight with our pro-life group, told us we couldn't have the same rights, right? So here I am in law school, and I'm suing my university. Kind of a crazy situation. Yeah. But we ended up winning that. And as a result of winning that, we had an event about the life issue, and there was a girl there that was being pressured to have an abortion. She talked with us. She decided to keep the baby, and she left the event, and we left the event knowing all of that led to being in a position to save one life. You don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it's always important to start from where are you in your community, what do you care about, and then work from that point and be prepared when God taps you on the shoulder.
Friends, we're going to have to leave it there today. You can check out the information at txvalues.org. Jonathan, thank you for being with us.
God bless you.
And friends, thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.